the long 18th century, and so that gives you a really wide period of time to experiment and looking for new information. You've pretty much got from sort of the early 1700s right the way through to 1830. Well, we write to 1830. To the death of George IV. It was a time of immense change and developments in technology, and there were wars going on and the French Revolution, but things were developing, things were changing, society was changing, sometimes for the good, sometimes not so good. And so you've plenty of material to work from, really, and there's still an awful lot to uncover. Personally, I think George I and George II did a lot to endear themselves to the public. George III, well, I think that's a given that he had his own difficulties health-wise. Our favourite, I suppose, would be George IV, but it would be wrong to cast him as the villain of the piece, which he so often is, really. He's known for his later years and his sort of gluttony and this really fat man sitting around doing nothing but spending the public purse. But he was actually quite an astute collector, and a lot of the things that he purchased, whilst at the time were probably perceived as a waste of money, historically they now make up part of the royal collection, and without that we would know less about the period. So a mixed bag, four monarchs, very, very different. We do focus probably more on things from a woman's perspective. When one of our books, An Infamous Mistress, is about the courtesan Grace Dalrymple Elliott, and you could say that she was a prostitute, but she wasn't in the sense that she was paid for sex directly. She would mix with the elite, and arguably her child, her daughter, was the product of a relationship with George IV. You do have to consider those aspects, and what drove people to go into prostitution was poverty largely, and that funnels through every period of society. And you go into the 19th century, and you've got the Jack the Ripper victims, and the latest book about them, which argues as to whether they were prostitutes or whether they were trying to live a normal, dignified life. It is an eclectic mix of 25 short stories. We persuaded, bullied, cajoled our publisher into allowing us to have colour images in it, so it's a really pretty, glossy book, as well as telling quite a few new stories and some stories that you might have heard of, might not have done, but with new information. It's based on the blog that we write, and we've been doing that now for 4 years. I think it's about, just over 4 years. And we're not the usual sort of historian. We find unusual subjects to write about, and if we write about somebody that's already known, then we've got to find a new twist on it. We've got to find a new piece of information. For instance, we've just written an article about Harriet Wilson, the courtesan, and that's a subject that's pretty much been done to death. And then there was a little tiny snippet that said, but no one knows where she's buried. And that sends us off scurrying, this must be known somehow, and we managed to find it. So we're basically super sleuths, and the book is reflective of the blog, and it's reflective of our propensity to actually search for new information. The first one that came out was The Life of Grace Dalrymple Elliott, and that's her biography, and it explores her family members as well. The second book is A Right Royal Scandal, which perhaps sounds more like a fictional title. It isn't. It's a factual book, and that is a follow-on. Grace is mentioned in there because it's sort of as a result of her. And that leads on to, there were 2 scandals at that time, and the second of which is related to our present royal family, and a chap who, Charles Cavendish Bentinck, who married a gypsy girl. And it's about their life as well. So again, it's all been done by piecing it together, disappearing down rabbit holes where we tend to spend most of our life. A Georgian heroine is a spin-off from both of those. She was going to be a sentence in Grace's book, and she found her own voice. So she warranted her own book, which is a Georgian heroine, which it would be amazing to, if time travel were possible, to actually go back and meet Rachel Charlotte Williams Biggs, because whilst we've managed to put together a book about her, there's still so many aspects of her life that it would be wonderful to actually, to get hold of her and say, why did you do this? What happened to you at this time? So if time travel were possible, but she was an amazing character, and one who I think both Joe and I greatly admire, because she was living life on her own terms, which for a woman at that time was almost impossible. We've written just over 500 blogs now, and they vary everything from looking at a piece of artwork that we've perhaps found out something new about, through to fashion. So we've got Bums, Tums and Downy Calves is one of them. We look at characters, the good, the bad and the ugly, and murders, which is appropriate for today. So yeah, come over and have a look.